I'm joined this morning by Major Deal, the General Manager of the Bermuda Housing Corporation, Mr. Mark Mello, the CFO of BHC, Mr. Andrew Diaz, the General Manager of the West End Development Corporation, Mr. Kent Bascom, the CFO of WEDCO, and Ms. Carmen Trott, Port Facilities Manager at WEDCO. Thank you for joining me for an update on operational changes at 3 of the 4 quangos that fall under the Ministry of Public Works, they being the Bermuda Land Development Company, the West End Development Corporation, and the Bermuda Housing Corporation. Before getting into the specifics of those changes, it is worth providing some background to the genesis of this entire project, a project that actually began on the 16th of July 2002, when the Cabinet decided that the Central Policy Unit should complete a review of 17 quangos which focus on the following objectives. 1, determine whether Bermuda's quangos as currently constructed are meeting government's aims, and if not, recommend methods of achieving alignment. 2, determine whether there is accountability to the government, and if not, recommend an adequate structure to accomplish this. And 3, develop mechanisms for ongoing review. The scope of the review covered a wide range of topics covering the establishment and governance of each body, its existing relevance, feasibility, effectiveness, levels of accountability to government, expenditure, income, whether the work could be more effectively or more efficiently carried out within government proper or by some other means, and determine governance and best practice in other jurisdictions, and to develop a mechanism for ongoing review. All laudable goals emanating from a report entitled Untangling Bermuda's Quangos, a review of quangos in the Bermuda government presented in October 2003, and the subsequent Sage Commission report presented a decade later in 2013. The government took the decision early in our administration to have another look at the reports and their recommendations with a view to actioning some of those items. Upon assuming this role, I asked the 3 managers to meet on a regular basis to discuss ways we could merge operations utilizing the recommendations of the Quango report as the basis for those discussions. As a result of the following decisions were made on October 4th, or announced on October 4th, 2018. On the 28th of September 2018, a freeze on all new hires was issued to all 3 quangos. Effective the 1st of November 2018, the BHC General Manager, Major Barrett Dill, assumed management responsibility for the BLDC as interim CEO in addition to his responsibilities at BHC. Effective November 1st, 2018 as well, the BHC CFO, Mr. Mark Mello, assumed financial responsibility for the BLDC in addition to his responsibilities at BHC. And the BLDC board remained intact and continued their work under the new management structure. The Ministry viewed these changes as an opportunity to immediately effect some cost savings by reducing duplication of roles, combining responsibilities, and bringing a sharper focus to deliver on the government's mandate to control costs and operate more efficiently. Now, some 27 months later, it is time for further changes to enhance operations. And so today I'm pleased to announce that Mr. Andrew Diaz will assume responsibility as the interim CEO of BLDC effective Monday, the 1st of February, 2021. Mr. Diaz will replace the current interim CEO, Major Barrett Dill, who was appointed just over 2 years ago. Major Dill will remain in his role as General Manager of BHC, albeit he is scheduled to retire in June this year. We shall shortly be seeking a replacement General Manager for the Bermuda Housing Corporation. Mr. Diaz brings with him a wealth of knowledge and business acumen in leading projects, which should prove very beneficial in light of the master water and sewage project that is well underway at BLDC. In light of the then CEO of BLDC retiring in October 2018, I wanted to make a few changes at the senior management level and considered the possibility of merging the Quangos, or at the very least, looking at synergies and economies of scale that will reduce the resources and expenses required to operate these entities. It was determined that the close alignments of BHC and BLDC would permit one person to oversee the management of both entities, and so we decided to ask the General Manager for BHC, Major Deal, to assume the additional role as interim CEO of the BLDC. After taking on the role, it was soon determined that the BLDC were several years behind with its financial audits. At that time, we also decided that the CFO of the BHC, Mr. Mark Mello, would accompany Major Deal to the BLDC to tackle the backlog of audits. As was mentioned last December in the House of Assembly, within 18 months, the two gentlemen pulled off the mammoth task of completing 7 years of audits, with the 2019 and 2020 audits currently well underway. Also during their tenure at BLDC, they launched Phase 1 of the East End Infrastructure Improvement Plan, arranged financing to start the process, identified small and medium-sized businesses to begin the work, demolished vacant and derelict buildings, improved street lighting at Southside, improved efficiencies by sharing the human resource, IT functions, and facilities management between the two Quangos. Due to Bermuda not expecting to receive any cruise visits until possibly June or July of this year, the timing is right for WEDCO's General Manager, Mr. Diaz, to be brought in to take on the responsibility without having any negative effect on the operations at WEDCO. Earlier this week, I met with the BLDC and WEDCO staff and the respective BHC and BLDC boards to announce the leadership changes. I reassured the teams that despite the economic downturn, this government is committed to ensuring persons remain employed. Mr. Mark Mello will maintain financial oversight of the BLDC as he works to complete the remaining 2 audits. In the absence of Mr. Diaz at WEDCO, CFO Mr. Kent Bascom and Port Facilities Manager Mrs. Carmen Tucker will assume leadership roles at WEDCO. The change in leadership will be for 6 months, after which time we will review the status to determine next steps. We view these changes as the best solution to addressing the current situation without the added expense of hiring new staff, and shall monitor the progress and make any necessary adjustments as the need arises. I'd like to publicly thank Major Deal and Mr. Mello for agreeing to lead the BLDC team over the past few years, and Mr. Diaz for looking at the broader picture by agreeing to assume this new role for the next 6 months. Thank you.
At this time, the discussion from the media. Any comments? No? All right. Well, thank you all for attending and have a great day. Thank you.
Good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we definitely got another photo.